Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney. Today's review, we're going to be looking at a cookie notice. So we've got the do not sell or share my personal information, reject all the cookies or accept them. Now I'm intrigued about where we can exercise. You can withdraw your consent or review your preferences at any time clicking on the cookie settings button. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to reject all and then I'm just going to quickly go to the bottom. That's interesting. So at the beginning of the banner, we were presented with the idea that we had the opportunity to address our cookie settings. I'm just going to search the entire page to make sure that I'm not missing it. So the banner originally said, if you want to address your settings, you can do so at the bottom with the cookie setting button. So we go to the bottom and there is no cookie setting button. Okay, so I'm just going to do a control find, cookie settings. Okay, so as you can see, I just checked. There is no word on this page that allows me to address my cookie settings. We're going to go through the notice and see if it exists elsewhere, but you can see how the flow for cookies needs to be consistent with what you make as a representation. This site said that we were going to be able to address our cookie settings, but we were not able to address our cookie settings. Through a control find on this page, there is no button that's called cookie settings. Let's just search for settings. Okay, there's no setting. Okay, so there's two words saying setting, but not related to cookie settings. So my question is, how am I going to be able to exercise my rights related to the cookies that are collected as a result of me using this website? How am I going to be able to exercise my preferences if there is no way to do so and the button doesn't exist? Let's click these buttons because maybe I'm misunderstanding what was represented to me as a user and consumer of this site. So I'm going to click on cookie notice again. We don't have the banner, but we do have this, I see. So I'm presuming this is what they're alluding to as the cookie settings. It did look like a cookie and it's to the left-hand side. So essentially they're saying that the only cookies that they obtain are strictly necessary cookies. And then opting out of the share or selling of personal information. What I think is unique is we've got performance cookies here and we've also got targeting and advertising cookies. I think for clarity purposes, it would be useful to have strictly necessary cookies, an item for performance cookies, an item for targeting and advertising, and then a clear button related to share or sell. Because to me, let's say I'm a consumer, let's say I wasn't a privacy lawyer. How does this concept relate to this one? And maybe there's an explanation here, but the separation of strictly necessary cookies and the share or selling of personal data, to me, is a little bit confusing as a consumer. So they're turned off anyway. Let's go back to the actual notice. This was last updated August 2024. So it'll be 2 years old in about another 5 months. The reason why I always look at this date on all of my reviews is because I think businesses need to take into consideration whether or not the cookies that are displayed or associated with their website, whether or not those have changed. There may be a description below about first-party cookies and third-party cookies, but let me give you some background insight into the level of sophistication that a lot of businesses are using. There's something called third-party cookies, and basically, you know this button that we saw before, share or sale of personal data. There is a relationship that many businesses have when it comes to advertising. Now, they are increasing in number the manner in which businesses can advertise to us as consumers. And you can see here that this business has said these cookies may be set through our site or by advertising partners. If your notice is last updated August 2024, the first question I have as a privacy lawyer is, have your advertising partners changed during this time? Now, it's likely that they have not, but from the work that I've done in the past, I know that generally businesses are changing their advertising partners, whether it's they're removing them or they're adding more advertising partners, and that could influence the cookies that you use. So if you're not updating your notice to reflect those changes, then that means that your practices are different to what you are representing on your site. Now, when I do these reviews, it's just for educational purposes. I don't have any insight knowledge into any of the workings of any of these businesses, but I do think it's valuable for organizations to know, one, what's at stake, and two, what privacy compliance truly looks like. I think many people aren't familiar with what a privacy lawyer does, and I think that this channel helps give insight into what it is exactly that we do for businesses and how we could potentially help your organization to comply, because this is very important. In 2026, most businesses do have some type of website. Websites are really important, and in using those websites, there's a lot of information gathering that is conducted through cookies. I don't think I've encountered in the last 2 years any website that only uses strictly necessary cookies. Most of them are introducing those performance and analytics and targeting cookies because it helps their business. And anytime you process personal data in any capacity, including cookies, you need to account for it from a transparency perspective on your site. So if you do have a site and you're using cookies, it may be you don't even know you're using cookies. You're still responsible. Your responsibility is not removed just because you're not aware of how your website works. And you need to account for that in all of the geographies. Every geography, every country has its own methodology in which you have to adhere to based on the cookies for your website. So if your products and solutions are being offered in Germany, China, the United States, it's your responsibility to know how your usage of cookies affects your website and what you have to put in place in order to adhere to those laws. It's like any other law. There are laws that dictate how you can use personal data, and cookies constitute personal data. Let's get into the actual notice itself. So they've given a definition, which I think is very good. Cookies are set by the website owner, so we know who the responsible party is. If you as a consumer ever had a question about cookie usage, then you could reach out to this organization. They've listed their legal entity name and its group companies. So let's say, for example, I have a question. If I ever had a question for this organization, I would just send them insight here. The other thing I wanted to make note of, and I don't think I've talked a lot about this, in some geographies, when an organization is required to give additional information about its privacy practices, some geographies require more than one method in which an individual can contact them. Now that varies country to country, and you'd need to seek privacy counsel on what your obligations are, but in some geographies just having one email address may be insufficient. So you need to check on that as a business. That's influenced by geography. Most of the times when I do these reviews, I don't have insight into the business's geography, so I cannot speak on one or another thing without understanding that. That really matters from a privacy perspective, whether it relates to your privacy notice or your cookie notice. So functional cookies, performance targeting, and strictly necessary. So we've got performance cookies addressed and we've got targeting cookies. We've got the strictly necessary ones too. I think the only thing I didn't see was functional. How do I as a consumer exercise my rights as it pertains to functional cookies? Because they've made a distinction between functional and strictly necessary on the notice, but that distinction hasn't been made in the preference center. Let me just confirm. Okay, so I think this is a really good learning moment. It's really important that if you're saying this is how we use cookies and you're offering them as a category of cookies, addressing that in the preference center is going to be really crucial for users to be able to reconcile what you say in your notice and what you've put in your preference center. The other thing that's drafted here by a privacy lawyer is looking at how it is that you do use the targeting and advertising cookies. You have to make this consistent with how you actually use them internally. Let me tell you something that's interesting in some businesses. Let's not talk just about cookies, let's talk about personal data. If you're telling your users that you use certain personal data in a manner that is inconsistent with your notice, that could be deemed as deceptive under the FTC Act Section 5. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you have a marketing form on your site, and on the marketing form it says, hey, we're going to send you email communications, but then you turn around and you use the email addresses that you've collected to sell to a third party. That is inconsistent with the notice that you've presented to your consumers. My expectation as I interact with this site is based on the preferences that I've exercised, this organization is not going to share or sell my personal information. If they go ahead and do that, then they're non-compliant. That's why all of this matters. And that's why it's valuable to have a privacy lawyer draft and review these for you. So I really hope you enjoyed this particular review. If you have any questions about my content, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another review.